We have to move on now to the Tony Abbott raised some issues in China. I raised them with Stephen Smith before. He talked about their need to match their economic reforms with political reforms. Nothing particularly contentious about that, I would have thought, but this, I think, was the most contentious. Here he is.
Chinese investment, though, is complicated by the prevalence of state-owned enterprises. It would rarely be in Australia's interest to allow a foreign government or its agencies to control an Australian business.
OK, now, we've had a bit of toing and froing from Tony Abbott and Joe Hockey on this, but I think they're both essentially saying nothing new here, that these sorts of balances have to be struck all the time, and it's true that this government did apply more rigorous tests.
Well, it continues the current foreign policy pattern of leaders in the winter break going abroad and saying fairly reasonable things and then having their opponents at home go absolutely crazy about it. I mean, to go abroad and express a sort of unremarkable truth and then get shellacked for it seems to be exactly what... I mean, Tony Abbott's a man who, a month or two back, was accusing the Prime Minister of lecturing the G20 because she wrote to everyone saying, actually, our economy's doing quite well.
That's a fair description of how that was responded to here in Australia, I think, by Bob Carr and Joe Hockey. Let's have a listen.
It just disturbs me that he is striking in 3 or 4 of the things he said about China what can only be seen, and which will be seen by them, I think, as an adversarial approach with China. And I think that is reckless. I think it is really dangerously dumb for this country's interest.
The comments by Bob Carr are just simply stupid. Well, Bob Carr's been Foreign Minister for 5 minutes, and now he's an expert on China. I know he's an expert on everything, Bob Carr. Now he's an expert on China. Bob Carr is an A-grade clown. Our policy is consistent, and it's consistent with what we've said in the past. It's no different.
But the question is, does it run the risk of the Chinese misinterpreting this? And that is not good when you consider their place in our economic framework.
Well, I would say no. Look, I supported Kevin Rudd. He went to Peking University in Beijing in 2008. He spoke about human rights. It was a good speech. He spoke bluntly. Tony Abbott's gone to Beijing. He's spoken bluntly. The Chinese want to buy our product because they want to buy our product, and I don't think there'll be any problem out of this.
Yeah. And I think Bob Carr actually rode back a bit in an address he gave to the Lowy Institute on Friday lunchtime.
I think that maybe we should stop sending them overseas. We should just find a little panic room that we can send them to where they can spout forth for the domestic audience and not be heard more
You're
broadly.
very tough on politicians because you say they don't say what they mean, you see, and a lot of journalists are like this. And then when a politician goes overseas and says what he or she means, then people sort of say, oh, well, really shouldn't have said it.
Jared, you have 100% misread my remarks. I've just said that I think that most of the things that have created massive international, foreign policy flaps over the last few months, whether it's Julia Gillard at the G20 or Bob Carr talking to Mitt Romney or Tony Abbott talking about military expenditure or Tony Abbott talking in Beijing, I've just said are generally reasonable remarks.
But you also just said they should stay home and say nothing. So
a bit of subtlety wouldn't hurt at times when you're dealing with these.
No, I just think that
I thought the more interesting remark Tony Abbott made in China was the one about our values, and nobody actually is interested at all.
Well, he gave some comments about, about the political future of China and the ins and outs of dealing with a system that's not a democratic one, which is, of course, a colossal issue.
The Chinese leadership are pretty tough. They've come out of the Cultural Revolution, millions died, 100 million were purged. They're pretty tough guys. I mean, I don't think they're going to be upset. They weren't particularly upset by Kevin Rudd. They won't be upset by Tony Abbott. I mean, it's not...